1910, New York Harbor. For millions, this was the gateway to a new life. But the reality behind these walls was far from the golden dream. This is the untold story of the brutal system that filtered a generation. Welcome to Ellis Island. The ordeal began long before the island appeared. Weeks in steerage, cramped, unsanitary, and filled with the stench of sickness. By the time they reached America, many were already physically and mentally at their breaking point. As the Statue of Liberty emerged from the fog, hope surged. It was the icon of freedom they had dreamed of, but it was a fleeting moment. Ahead lay the red brick fortress of Ellis Island, and for many it would soon become an island of tears. Steamships like the Baltic and the Oceanic unloaded thousands every hour. The air was a thick, overwhelming mix of coal smoke, sea salt, and the raw anxiety of 10,000 souls speaking a dozen different tongues in a confusing new world. The first stop was the baggage room. Immigrants were forced to leave their precious belongings behind, everything they owned in the world, and proceed with only what they could carry. It was the first step in stripping away their old lives. The moment you stepped onto the island, you were under surveillance. This was the 6-second physical. As you climbed the stairs to the registry room, the doctors were already scanning you for signs of disease, disability, or mental weakness. A limp, a wheeze, or even a nervous twitch was enough to trigger an alarm. The doctors of the U.S. Public Health Service were trained to scan 60 potential conditions in mere seconds. One small physical flaw could mean immediate detention. The chalk mark was a silent sentence written on your clothing. E stood for eyes, specifically trachoma, a highly contagious infection that caused painful blindness. If you were marked with an E, you were immediately separated from your family. A circle around a chalk X signified suspected mental deficiency or moral turpitude. It was a catch-all for anyone who didn't fit the rigid definition of a productive new citizen. Once marked, a terrifying interrogation awaited you in the back rooms. The eyelid inspection was the most dreaded part of the physical. Using a button hook, doctors searched for the telltale granules of trachoma. It was painful, invasive, and for many, it was the definitive end of their American dream. For those who passed the medical line, the next hurdle was the registry room, a vast, echoing hall that sounded like a modern Tower of Babel. 5,000 people, all waiting for their names to be called from the ship's manifests. The noise was deafening. Interpreters shouted orders in dozens of languages, trying to bring order to the chaos. For a simple farmer from the hills of Sicily or a tailor from a Russian shtetl, this was a terrifying glimpse of the new world. Wait times stretched for hours, sometimes days. The air was heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies and the humidity of 1,000 breaths. In this hall, the initial excitement of arrival often died of sheer physical and emotional exhaustion. The legal exam was the final gateway. Inspectors cross-referenced your answers against the ship's manifest provided by the steamship companies. Who paid your ticket? Where are you going? Do you have a job waiting? Any discrepancy was fatal. The most common reason for legal exclusion was being liable to become a public charge. If you had no money and no relatives to vouch for you, you were seen as a burden. America wanted able-bodied workers, not dependents. Every detail was checked. If your name didn't match the list, or if the inspector suspected you were part of a contract labor scheme, which was illegal, you were pulled out of line for a Board of Special Inquiry hearing. Women traveling alone faced even harsher scrutiny. In 1910, a woman without a male escort was often detained on suspicion of moral turpitude or the inability to support herself. Many were forced to wait for a relative to claim them and prove their identity. We are halfway through our 1910 Reconstruction. If you find these historical exposés important, please subscribe. Only 30% of our audience is currently following our journey. Now, back to the Island of Tears. For the 20% who were flagged, the next destination wasn't the ferry to Manhattan. It was detention. The Island of Tears lived up to its name in the cramped, barred wards of the medical buildings on the back islands. The Ellis Island Hospital was a state-of-the-art facility for its time, but for the patients, it felt like a prison. They were close enough to see the Statue of Liberty through the glass, but a world away from actually touching it. Contagious diseases like measles, scarlet fever, and tuberculosis claimed many lives here. Children were often separated from their parents for weeks, left to heal or die, in the care of strangers who didn't speak a word of their language. The psychopathic ward held those deemed mentally unfit or insane. In the overwhelming stress of the journey and the inspection, many suffered mental breakdowns. To the inspectors, this was evidence of constitutional inferiority. For the families, it was a tragedy. Those detained for legal reasons slept in the dormitories. The conditions were harsh, triple-tiered metal bunks with no privacy. The air was thick with the anxiety of hundreds of people who didn't know if they would ever leave the island. Food was provided by the government, but it was a far cry from home. In the dining hall, thousands were fed in shifts. For many, it was the first time they tasted American beef, or the first time they tasted the bitter salt of detention. If your legal status remained in doubt, you faced the Board of Special Inquiry. It was a court with no lawyers and no appeals. They held your entire future in a single unanimous vote. One word: admitted or deported. 2% of those who arrived were officially rejected and deported. It sounds like a small number, until you realize that meant thousands of people every month were sent back to the poverty or persecution they had risked everything to flee. The most brutal part was the separation. Families were split, a mother allowed to stay, but her child rejected for illness. Decisions had to be made in minutes that would haunt a lineage for a century. The system was clinical, but the pain was raw. After the final exam, you walked the stairs of separation. The left path led to the ferry to New York. For those on this path, the American dream had finally begun. The weight of the world seemed to lift with every step. The right path led to the ticket windows. These families were heading into the heart of the continent, bound for the steel mills of the Midwest or the farmlands of the West. Their long journey was far from over. But the center path, that was the path to the detention cells. It was a path of uncertainty, of deep fear, and for many, a path that led right back to the harbor and the ship that would take them away. For the lucky ones, the first step into America was the Exchange Bureau, trading liras, drachmas, and rubles for American dollars. It was the first time many held the currency of their new home, the first tangible proof of their new life. At the end of the hall was the kissing post. This was where immigrants were finally reunited with the family members who had gone before them. The relief was overwhelming, years of separation ending in a single, desperate embrace. As the ferry pulled away toward Manhattan, Ellis Island receded into the mist. Behind them lay the system that had judged them. Ahead lay the struggle for survival in the tenements and factories of a city that never slept. The reality of America was often as brutal as the gateway. From the clinical halls of Ellis Island to the crowded tenements of the Lower East Side, the immigrant journey was one of constant struggle and immense resilience. Ellis Island remains a monument to the millions who risked everything. In 1910, it was the gateway to a dream that was as harsh as it was hopeful. Thank you for watching this reconstruction of our shared history.